Here we are. And the live transcript as well that everybody, I think, wants. All right, everybody, good to see you. Thanks very much for joining. We have a really important topic. We've been talking about this in all the previous sessions, because we were talking about global leadership, but we're talking about what does good global leadership look like. And the differentiation, if you remember, was good leaders are leaders clearly that are have a broad view of their responsibility, rather than just interested in their own self and their own short-term wins. And that's one of the themes that we're going to develop throughout today when we talk about global leadership. We have two speakers with us today instead of one. We have a lady called Stephanie who will be joining us at 12:30, who runs a business that looks at sustainability and corporate social responsibility. And that's what she advises businesses on. And then later on, we have a gentleman joining us called Jim Baxter, who works within Leeds University, who runs the Center for Ethical Leadership, or the philosophy of ethics and integrity. And what does that mean to leadership? And why is that important in the future? And then we have the case study at the end. So we have three sections which are mixed. I have loaded up the slides set into the Minerva system already, and I did that on Sunday night actually this time. So if anything should happen to Zoom, please stay on. If I fail to be able to present or anything goes wrong with the technology, you have backup. That's the main thing. So let's get into it, if that's okay. I wanted to just run you very quickly through what I think of responsible leadership. Human beings as a whole often need symbols and often need models in order for them to more clearly define some terms, what we're talking about. That's why we have stories. That's why we have myth. That's what religion uses all the time. That's what political figures use all the time. They create an image. For me, my hero is Cyrus the Great. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Cyrus the Great, but because I've been interested in leadership for most of my life, and I've been looking for the hero of who, think for me represents everything that was the best. And there's plenty of figures out there. There are individuals who worship Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, Churchill, Mao Zedong, Cengiz, Muhammad, the Prophet. I mean, anybody could choose their own. It doesn't matter. Mine is Cyrus. And as I've heard some Christian friends say, when they come to a decision, they would think to themselves, what would Jesus do right now? What would he decide? I find myself asking the same thing. What would Cyrus do in this situation? Now, those of you who may have come across Cyrus before realize that he's the founder of the Persian Empire, the Achaemenid Empire. He's the father of the Iranian nation, as people said. He lived about 580 BC. And whether he was the shepherd boy that rose to be king, or whether he was the lost son of the or grandson of the Mede king, as the mythology says, who was given to a shepherd to raise, doesn't matter. The point is, this person did things differently. If you look at all the empires before this, whether the Ashurian, the Babylonians, the Mitannis, whoever you talk about, and you look at what is said about them, if you look at what the evidence is, you go to museums and have a look at what they decorated the palaces with, they were leading through fear. Ashurbanipal's palace in Nineveh, the carvings that are in Louvre, that are in Metropolitan Museum, that are in the British Museum, showed depictions of people being flayed alive, being, impaled, and pain and fear. If you recall back to our first session, when I asked you, is it better to be feared or loved? There are no images like that in the palaces of Cyrus and his followers. There are scenes of friendship, of people holding hands, of the Persians holding hands with the Medes, holding hands with the other people that were in their domain. And they had a huge empire. And if you read some of his quotes, success should always be called for greater kindness, generosity, and justice. Only people lost in darkness treat as occasion for great greed. This, for me, gives me an indication of what I want to look up to. What is it that I think represents the best? There are other people in the world that I admire. I always admired Nelson Mandela. I admired other people for various different reasons. But this person, that I'm talking about now, changed the way things were done. He took over Babylon, the oldest and greatest country at the time, without any bloodshed, as a savior. He freed the Jews from slavery. The cylinder at the bottom is the first Bill of Rights that's in the British Museum, and it says everybody who is under my domain is free to worship whatever god they want, speak their own language, have their own customs, and will be paid for their labor, will be paid for any goods that are taken. So he abolished slavery as a economic model within the empire. And this person, would turn an enemy into a friend. He conquered Croesus, the Lydian king, and immediately made him a friend and made him his personal advisor and took him with him everywhere and treated him as an honored king. So who's your hero? Is really important, because that gives you some anchor, that gives you something that is an image that you want to look at, because we all have our own definitions. What we want to do today is really talk about that. What do we mean when we talk about responsible leadership? Responsible for what? Why is it important? Why is it becoming more important? And then finally, how do you do it? I'm assuming we all want to be good leaders. And by good, I mean that our impact overall is positive, not just for ourselves, but for the environment around us, for the team around us, for the companies we work for, etc. How do you do it? So that's the theme for today's discussions. Now, before we get into anything else, I want to say that in most countries, there is a legal framework which describes what the responsibility of the head of the companies are. Now, I don't know exactly whether you have something like that in China. I would think that you do. I can tell you that in a lot of countries that I've worked in the past, they did have them. And this is the UK version. I don't know whether you remember, we had the Director General of the Institute of Directors speaking to us. And this is a quote from their website. And of course, they ran training courses on making sure that anyone who's a formal director of a company is aware of the responsibility they carry. So as an example, if there's a health and safety failure that is the fault of the company, and people die in fires, in accidents or whatever, in most countries, those directors can go to jail. If there's a fraud, and the directors knew about it, they allowed it, or they participated in it, they stole money from whoever, those people can be taken to court, and they could be prosecuted and could be put in prison. They could have all their houses, all their assets seized. So there is a legal responsibility, which is the minimum, which is the basics that we can start talking about. That is denoted by people who are in position of decision making. Now, you could be shareholders and you could be directors that are officially recorded in the legal framework of the country, or you could be in position of decision making as a senior employee, and the legal framework of various different countries would be different. Nevertheless, here are some things which we should look at as the minimum, as the basic requirement that is put in law, over and above the morality over and above the measure of what we think is right based on our ethics and based on our belief about what good people do and what bad people do. Do you have anything similar to this in China? Legal framework for directors of the companies? I'm sure you do.
We may like pay the money to these guys.
No, I meant, did you have when you open up a company, do you have to register yourself as the owner, as the director of the company, and then the government and the legal framework have you under control?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Or you can, you know, like let your relatives to be the guys.
It's really interesting you say that, because a lot of the time now, as there's more and more cases in the world of directors who were just by name and didn't actually have any control, but like you said, their relatives put their wives on the list, they put their mother, their whatever. There is a pressure now coming to say, be careful, because when things go wrong, even if you were just there by name, you are still liable. You're still somebody that the courts can come after, that the police can come after, that just having your name put up there is a risk. There are an awful lot of examples now. If you look, for example, in companies that have failed, big banks that have failed, where the directors are being held personally liable and saying, why didn't you guys check whether the audit was correct? The auditors are liable. Why didn't you audit this company properly? Why is it that the shareholders have been defrauded and their money been stolen? You know, why did this happen under your watch? So there is a degree of responsibility that's legal that we need to be aware of. And my advice to you, if anybody asks you to do that, be very careful. Be very careful. You need to check whether the company is properly set up, whether they're doing things in an ethical way, etc. Now, the second thing I would say is that as well as what we do, and you've seen this chart before, there is a lot to do with ethics of what we do that's to do with how you do things. So yes, you know, you might have done the letter of the law. You might be absolutely correct in terms of the policies that you wrote and followed. But actually, in terms of the emotion, in terms of the feelings you create, in terms of the image that would be seen by people, they would know that you did wrong. And both of those things need to be taken into account. What we do and then how it was done. Because it's entirely possible that the how it was done isn't correct. And you know, I don't know much about Chinese philosophy, but what I do know is that the way things are done are just as important, if not more important, than what was done. And I think that is really a truism which we can all use. And this is also why I use the yin and the yang here as a symbol. I hope I'm using it correctly. If I'm not, please do excuse me or explain it to me. So there are an awful lot of things that are now being scrutinized in the new world about how we do things. A lot of it's to do with your brand. So, you know, we want to come across as a good company. We want to come across as a good place to work. For the customers as well, for the suppliers, for the government, etc. But is that reality? And the same for the leader. You know, the image of the leader versus what the leaders really like. Yes, you can go on the stage and say all the right things, and then later on you do things that are contrary and different to what you projected. So there is a lot that we can later on talk about how you ensure that your brand is valuable, especially in the new world with globalization of information, globalization of your business, and you then have a global brand. How do you ensure that those are values attached to that brand that are appropriate for every one of those cultures, but also reinforced by actions, by true examples of what people see. Because I think there was a saying by Winston Churchill that said you could fool some of the people some of the time. You can't fool all the people all the time. And eventually, the real sense of what you're like and what your business is like will come out in the examples, irrespective of how good your PR department, how good the marketing that you're actually putting in place. The other thing I want to say is that all the evidence about the new generation, and this is true of all the countries, tells you that Generation Y, which is millennials, and also now Generation Z, are far more sensitive to the ethics and the brand that that company represents or that leader represents. And it's becoming far more important to them that they do purchasing from places that are behaving ethically, that are not destroying the planet, that are not abusing children, that are not hurting animals. You know, a lot of different factors that are more important to the new generation than they were to the old generation. And we'll talk about that next week when we talk about generational changes, but I think this is being proven by almost all the research that I've seen, that this factor about not just the brand, but actually the details of proving the brand, about you being ethical as a business, you being ethical as a leader, is going to become very important to the decisions being made by Generation Y and Generation Z. So exactly what are we responsible for? You know, we talk about responsibility. Okay, what are you responsible for? Clearly, if you're in a business, you're responsible for financial performance of the business. You're responsible for the brand. You're responsible for your resources, for your team, for your employees. You're responsible for the assets that the shareholders have put under your control. But one more, if you're the leader, what responsibilities do you carry? Some of the responsibilities are on this list here that my brainstorm. So, are you responsible for how ecologically friendly you are? How much energy your company is using? How efficiently you're using that energy? What is the byproduct of your business processes? Do you create anything harmful for the environment? What's the local community getting out of your business? What about local talent? What about local places? I mean, I tell you, when I started working in Iraq, we were opening up a plant near Najaf to make Coca-Cola and to make juice. It became really important that not only you recruit a good mix of different people from that community, so you don't have only Shiites, you don't have only Sunnis, you don't have Yazidis or Christian or Jewish Iraqis, you have a good mix, but that you actually start maybe helping them with an electricity generator for the local community. So when the electricity goes out, they benefit from it, and they know they benefited because of the company that was in that location. That you provide a free, a creche and school for the younger children to allow women to be able to come and work. That you provide support to local initiatives, maybe to the local mosque, maybe to a clinic, maybe a library or something like that. In a lot of places, that's really important. And I know that Chinese businesses are doing a lot of that in Africa. Everywhere I go in Africa, I could see everything from the roads to the hospitals to the schools were built and sponsored by Chinese businesses. So it's something that's very clearly being done. And the return on investment on that kind of thing is massive, massive. Odd for me that the Western powers don't learn that for a fraction of the money they're spending on the military, they could be doing so much good and getting so much more benefits. Nevertheless, don't want to get political. That's what I'm talking about. And then well-being. Now, clearly, there was an awful lot of discussion about child labor or people in poverty working in India, in South America. China was always talked about as a cheap place to produce and low regulation. I think that's changing now, and now moving to Africa very much for that kind of thing. But is it right? Are those people wage slaves who have no other choice, putting their health at risk, putting their future and education at risk? Are they being abused, and are they being exploited unfairly? You also have the issue about diversity and inclusion we've touched in the past. You know, are you providing a good mix of employees? Are they all being treated with respect equally? Are they being treated fairly and consistently? How are you including them in your business? What kind of contracts are you giving them? Now, there's a lot of questions about these zero-based hours contracts where you only call people. I mean, Amazon does that all the time. You know, I only call you when I want to call you and when I need you. And when I don't need you, you have no responsibility for you whatsoever. And that's a growing trend. How do we feel about that? And then authenticity. Are the leaders genuine? Do they believe what they say? And we talk about what authenticity is. How is authenticity different to sincerity? How is that different to integrity? How is that different to ethics, which I think we got a gentleman called Jim Baxter coming to talk to us about. A lot of these things. And then really, who is responsible when we talk about the leader being responsible for these things? Who are we talking about? Is it the shareholder who's responsible? Is it the CEO, the directors? Is it HR? Is it all the employees? Is it the government because they didn't put the right regulations in place? What about you being responsible for your suppliers? Can you be responsible for your suppliers when they do bad things in your name? It gets to be very complicated indeed, very quickly. And maybe different people in an organization were responsible for different things. I mean, diversity, inclusion, often when I was in HR, it was seen as an HR thing, same as human rights and well-being, health and safety were given to a particular people. Of course, the CEO carries the responsibility overall, but you know, who is responsible as a leader is a critical factor, and an interesting one, because frankly, the more people are responsible, the less that individual feels they're enabled to make decisions and to make actions happen. When lots of people are responsible, that means no one is responsible. When one person is responsible, they carry a very heavy weight in their shoulder. And maybe they're not able to deliver that responsibility because they don't have the resources. They don't have the decision-making authority. Really, quite a lot of things there. Is there anything missing from this list, in your opinion? Because this is just my brainstorm. Anything else should be on that list about responsible leadership that we're missing? Okay, so I take it you think it's a comprehensive list. The list, would include things like your ability to, I mean, right now, give access to all the employees to information, the right, whether they should have that information, shouldn't have that information, etc. When I was in Coca-Cola signed up to the United Nations Protocol on Human Rights. And every one of us was asked to do an audit of whether we were adhering to that. The problem is you're using a definition of human rights, which is very idealistic. And, the kind of questions that would come up to me would be, in your operation in Saudi Arabia, are you paying all the people the same rate for the same work? And clearly we weren't. We're paying the Saudis a different wage. We're paying to the other people. We're paying the women a slightly different wage, actually higher, because I wanted to encourage more women to come and work in Saudi environment. But I mean, nevertheless, there was some cultural elements that made it very, very difficult. Really, really difficult. In fact, I'm not aware of anyone in a country like Saudi Arabia who was able to adhere to those things. Very clearly, women were not able to do all the things that men were able to do in that environment, and in many countries like that. And it's the law of that country. So you have a very simple decision. Do I want to do business in that country? Yes or no? But if you decide to do business in that country, are you then breaking with your own belief system and your own values about what human rights are all about and how they could be working? Look, there is a lot in here which was, I promise you, day-to-day decisions for me. It is not a matter of a hypothetical, theoretical element. There are day-to-day decisions you make that are directly relevant to your value system, to what is right and what is not right, but short-term expedient. None of this stuff is theoretical. I can give you thousands of examples of decisions that need to be made by leaders that are very clearly decisions about what they stand for and what they consider to be responsible leadership. And that's what we want to talk about. Now, I noticed that Stephanie just joined us. So I'd like to make sure that we don't, oops, it's gone to sleep again, my system. Excuse me for a second, I'll just fix that. To make sure that we give her the time that she needs for her presentation. And so Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate your time.
Not at all. Can you hear me? I'm
Yes,
just moving to somewhere
absolutely.
where I have better reception in my house. So hopefully that will work.
Oh gosh, I don't know how, but we've got one of our colleagues on the call as the host now. I don't know how. Could you make me the host again, please, or make Stephanie the host? And I think the recording stopped as well. Can we start the recording again, please? Hang on, let me call Ellie, ask her to make me host again.
I know the student how to give you the host, how to get the host back to you.
Yes, I don't know how that's happened with the Zoom. This is happening every single week now. Let me give Ellie a call and ask her to just come back on the call and make me the host. Bear with me a second.
Who is the host?
Well, normally, since she owns the call, Elena, sorry, she can come on and be the host. But right now, I think one of you guys is the host. I don't know how, but the system. I think it's your tongue. I think you're the host at the moment. Can you make me the host, please? Stephanie, are you able to show your slides? Can you see if you can share? Hello, hi. Elena, the Zoom went dead on me. I had to come back on, and I'm not the host anymore. Could you come in and help me make me the host again so I can carry on recording? Okay, no problem. Oh, I'm the host now. Okay, thank you so much. Cheers. Thank you, Elena. Cheers. Bye. Okay, we're back on. So I'm back as the host. Stephanie, are you able to show your slides?
I'm not sure. When I tried it yesterday.
No, it worked perfectly well yesterday when you did show it.
Yes, the problem was I lost all my notes that I was using and wasn't able to see them on my screen. So I'm not sure whether that will work or not, but we can have a go if
Yes,
you're
please.
happy to bear with me.
No problem.
And we'll see whether we can get that organized.
Yes, there you go. I can see it. You're presenting now.
Okie dokie. So the slight issue that I have now is, let me just see, is how I retrieve my notes. Yes, the problem I have, is it possible, Masood, for you to send the slides
No,
to everybody?
the slides were sent to everybody already. I just think it's
brilliant.
easier if you can just talk through the slides as a visual, unless if you don't want to use the slides, that's fine. But if you are able to, that'll be great.
Okay, right. All right. Well, let me have a go then. I'll talk about, as just talk through the slides. So I've been asked to talk about sustainability in business, and I thought it would be interesting to approach this from a few different angles. I can see that you've just been talking about corporate social responsibility, and I'm certainly going to touch on that. Going to touch on the subject of ESG and a little bit about, how that differs, if it differs from corporate social responsibility, and why that's really, driving very sort of different behaviour at the moment, and why that's occupying so many corporate boards. And I thought I'd also touch on, what sustainability means more generally, because whilst everybody's very focused on ESG at the moment, I don't think they're the only things that we think about when we think about a sustainable business. So just to introduce myself, my name's Stephanie Burrows. I'm the Chief Executive and also the founder of a social enterprise called the Head Partnership. We are headquartered here in Leeds. My background is in law. So I used to be a partner in a big law firm, and I ended up leaving the partnership back in 2004, actually because I had been instrumental in setting up the firm's CSR programme as was, and linking the firm to support a failing school in South Leeds. We were acting at the time for the Department for Education, and we wanted to do something that went beyond the legal brief to support our client's agenda. And I saw absolutely astonishing things result from the projects that we set up in partnership with that school, the way in which young people's lives were changed, but also, if I'm honest, a whole raft of value and benefits for those of us that got involved in supporting that programme, which at the time I think had been quite unexpected. So I ended up leaving the partnership, which caused some consternation at the time, and which felt in many respects a bit ahead of its time, really, back in 2004, to set up a Head Partnership, really to act as a go-between between business and community and some of the sort of gritty, tough issues that we need to solve as a society, and to help sort of facilitate and set up partnerships and help businesses work out how they can make really effective social value programs. So that's really what my day job is now. I have since grown this into a business, I set it up as a non-profit distributing business, so as a social enterprise. That felt to me to be the authentic thing to do. This was really about leading by example and trying to persuade businesses to get involved and look beyond profit, look at that sort of you know, triple bottom line, if you like. I'll come on to that. And it felt that doing that from the standpoint of being a social enterprise that was not seeking to make profits ourselves from this work would serve us well. And I think on the whole that is right. That was the right decision at the time. So I thought I would start off really by talking about what do I think sustainability is. And in short, I think it's about what's on the screen. And that's also been my experience really over the years running my own business, that you have to make sure that your business is going to be successful in the future. Really, it's going to continue to be successful and grow, regardless of what the future might throw at us. And you know, of course, we've been very much tested over the last 18 months, 2 years with the pandemic, and you know, the utter shock that has brought to all businesses, including our own. So I think that always looking ahead, really, not spending all your time in the present, looking at what you're doing today, but having that really broad perspective around what's happening in the world, the trends and changes, the things that you're going to need to be responding to, the things that you need to start planning for and around right now in order to still have a business in the future. And those are many, and they are really various. You know, we've obviously all been you know, watching the COP26 conference, and you know, top of our list probably when we think about sustainability will be all of those environmental issues that businesses need to respond to. And you know, we are, you know, governments are locked in discussions about setting targets and so on. You know, we have to remember that you know, those targets aren't going to get delivered unless we deliver them, and that means, you know, businesses changing their practices, changing their business models, in some cases, you know, completely overhauling their products and services and the way they operate. And also us as individuals, and you know, our responsibility for behaviour change, and the sort of behaviour change on the scale that it's going to be needed. So of course we're thinking about environmental considerations, and businesses are busy you know, looking now at you know, the way in which they can minimise their carbon emissions and tackle waste and pollution and those sorts of things. But it's not just about the environment. You know, there is also you know, a strong sort of social dimension to this, and the Sustainable Development Goals, although many of them are related to environmental issues, you know, quite a number of them do relate to, you know, broader social issues around things like eradicating hunger and addressing poverty and access to education and decent work, and gender equality, that kind of thing, which I think is really interesting. I've got, before I come on to talk about some of the things that we're doing with businesses, particularly under the S bit of ESG, I thought it might be worth just looking at just a few of these models. I mean, the triple bottom line, you know, this is the model which is around people, profit and planet, and this is very much the the principles that social enterprises, for instance, a business such as our own, you know, would be looking to deliver its operations in a way which is, you know, not causing a detriment to the planet, you know, that stacks up as a business, and which is being fair, if you like, in the way that you know, the operations are being delivered. So that triple bottom line you will often hear being referred to, and I think it's interesting when we come on to look at, you know, the relationship between CSR and also ESG, you know, how much of this actually tracks across. Corporate responsibility, you know, back in 2004 when I started out, you know, everybody was talking about corporate responsibility. Actually, there's far few people talking about it these days. They're all talking about ESG at the moment. And it's an interesting point about whether, you know, CSR is dead and buried, or whether it's just a different thing, or it's in the background. But you know, back in 2004, you know, businesses were waking up to this idea that you know, who they were as a business and their values was about how they behaved, not just internally with their workforce and their customers, but also externally within society, and also, you know, their relationship with the environment. And so, you know, spearheaded by charities like Business in the Community, you know, a lot of businesses embarked really on CSR, some of them for the first time, a largely sort of voluntary regime and self-regulated in the sense that, you know, businesses set out their own objectives and strategies. You know, there was no sort of real measurement of that. But certainly it has played a really key part in helping to, I think, build corporate culture, to I think really help businesses to explain who they are to their staff, to their customers, and to the external world. I think the thing that corporate social responsibility has maybe not been so focused on, which we're now getting within the ESG, environmental, social and governance framework, is really measurement, and the fact that you know, what seems to be really driving ESG is really the assessment and the external assessment of the extent to which businesses are actually setting and meeting targets around environmental, social, and also the governance. So I think that there is a difference between the two, and ESG is far more specific and quantifiable, and, you know, criteria led. Although, you know, some things remain the same, which is essentially it's for each business really to work out for itself, you know, what is important to it, what is material to it as a business. And there is certainly no, at the moment, sort of set framework around, you know, how this is done. But the measurement is increasingly important, you know, to I think in particular investors, and I think this is really what seems to be driving ESG. And it's very interesting that since the pandemic has lifted, I think things like the pandemic and climate change have really focused business minds. We've seen a huge uplift in the number of businesses that are contacting us for assistance in thinking through, in particular, how they approach the S bit of their ESG agenda, and thinking about their diversity and inclusion strategies within that, thinking about you know, their workforce relations, thinking about their external community links, And for some of them, you know, this is kind of quite existential stuff around accessing talent and accessing skills, particularly digital skills. You know, the workplace is changing very quickly, and they have rightly identified, you know, that accessing the talent they need to fuel and continue to fuel the growth in their businesses is a real risk area. And so that's where they're coming and working with us in the main, structuring programs with young people to profile their sector, to profile their business with young people, to try and attract more diverse workforce, and to make sure that you know, they have got access to the skills they need. So it's a really sort of broad framework. It's the ESG framework, and I say no set rules about how it's approached. And as a result, you know, seeing a lot of businesses actually at the moment trying to put frameworks in place and to define, you know, what that means for them and what are the things that make their business unsustainable and the things that they will need to change, and that will vary enormously from business to business. Although we are seeing that skills and access to talent is actually something that all of them have got on their list, which is interesting, isn't it? Saying something really about, you know, what's driving this and what's driving the you know, the desire for sustainability and the frameworks. I think it's lots of things, but ultimately it is that long-term sustainable success that we were talking about at the beginning. I think one of the biggest things, two biggest things at the top, I've mentioned climate change already, but also the investment environment, I think, is very interesting at the moment in terms of investor behaviour and the extent to which investors are piling into what are termed ESG investments, and in consequence, you know, the appeal of those companies and their ability to access finance. And I think it was interesting to hear during COP26 the aspiration that the Chancellor set out to make the UK, you know, a net zero green finance centre, and just quite how that will develop and what that will mean. But it is likely that, you know, businesses who are not responding to these sustainability drivers will find it harder and harder to access the finance that they need, and so the market ultimately will pressure them into making those changes. But I think all the aspects on this scorecard, I think, are relevant. You know, the pressure is coming from everywhere. It's coming from consumers who are changing their preferences and buying different things or stopping buying things. It's coming from, you know, increased regulation. So, you know, the you know, legislative powers, we're going to see more of those. You know, fear of being on the wrong side of litigation. But then a lot of those things that were driving CSR around social mobility, social justice and fairness, you know, the talent and diversity aspects that I mentioned, and then you know, brand and reputation, you know, what the business actually stands for and how quickly actually that can be lost, particularly in our world of social media. So I think that there's lots of pressures from all over. I thought I'd give you a quick case study. Are we all right for time, Masood? Just whiz through this, and then this is a really good illustration, I think, of a particular business that we've been working with, and just to sort of pick out, you know, some of the aspects of sustainability that are really important to them. So they're part of Tencent. They are a games design company, growing very, very quickly. We've been working with them for a few years. their drivers are very much around diversifying talent within the gaming industry, because just employing or recruiting white men, which has been the profile of employment within the sector for too long, is going to seriously limit growth. So they've been working with us to improve the diversity and size of their talent pool, very much to try and change the perception of career roles within gaming, particularly amongst girls, and also to counteract, parent perception, which is that gaming is frankly a frivolous thing that none of their children should be working within. By showing actually what working within the industry is like. So for all sorts of reasons, they've been working with us, and we've structured a programme of engagement that we've taken out into schools around about Sumo Studios, which involve competitions and lesson takeovers, showing how the different subjects relate to work. They've been involving their own workforce to get involved in the programme. So there's been lots of opportunity for staff to get engaged in this work. It's really strengthened their culture of who Sumo is and what it stands for and what's important. And importantly, the activity that they've been doing is measurable, so they can feed that in then to their ESG scorecard and reporting, and has provided a lot of opportunity for them to get some positive profile and reputation, including winning the BIS award this year for their education programs. And one of the young people who was part of this program actually won a national BAFTA for his work with Sumo as well. So there's a little bit there about just a concrete example, really, of how business within the digital creative world has gone about identifying that aspect of its S agenda. I thought I'd finish really just by adding a few reflections of my own on sustainability. Obviously, we help our business clients to be more sustainable in the ways that I've been describing. But I mentioned COVID, that the real measure really, I think, of whether you were set up in a way that enables you to meet any future challenges is when something like that comes along. We were at the wrong end of everything that was happening in schools. I had to furlough just about everybody in the business for a period of time. And we might not have survived that. But actually our business, one thing I have learned through COVID is that we do have a sustainable business. We've invested really heavily in our relationships over the years with our corporate partners, with the value we've delivered for them, how well we know them. Every single one of them stood by us. We went into the whole pandemic with resources in the bank, with cash in the bank. We've come out of it with cash in the bank. We've used the opportunity that pandemic afforded to sort of reshape and remold our business and think about what was demand going to be like, what should our role be going forwards, what was going to be asked of us, how do we get ready to deliver that, how do we change our business, our products, our services, and really think ahead. So as we've had this uptick and surge of interest, in ESG, we're ready and we're able to help our clients with that. So I think that there's a whole raft of things really about being a sustainable business, which isn't necessarily about having an ESG scorecard. And the last thing I would say on that is actually a personal reflection of my own, which is that as the founder of Ahead, and its only CEO, I'm thinking now to what happens when I am no longer the CEO, and I want the business to be able to continue to do all its important work, when I'm retired and I need to be thinking right now about succession and about how to build the capacity within the team and the ownership of the team to take that on from me. And if I don't do that, I haven't got a sustainable business. And one of the things that we did as we came out of the pandemic was we completely altered the basis on which we were structured and removed hierarchy in our business. We've now moved to a flat structure. We work on an empowered model where everybody self-manages. And this is part and parcel really of now really starting to think ahead to that handover and to develop a sense of ownership amongst everybody who's working for our team. You know, that is a journey that we're embarking on together and working out as we go forwards on our new model, that has been a fantastically sort of liberating thing for all of us, actually, removing line management and, you know, and all the layers that go along with that. So that is part of our sustainability strategy going forward. So I've meandered there around a lot of different topics. I hope that has been interesting and given you a flavour of my thoughts on it. I don't know, Masood, whether we've got time for a couple of questions.
Absolutely. Any questions, team? I guess not.
I think that's probably because it's lunchtime.
Not there. I mean, these guys are all in China, so it'll be dinner time.
Okay.
But, absolutely. Stephanie, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
It's been lovely to talk to you all. Yes. Thank you very much to everyone who's participated.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Cheers. Bye-bye. Interesting topics. Let me just share with you a couple of insights. First of all, do you remember when we were talking about good leadership at the beginning and definition of leadership? The context for leadership was, okay, are you a leader who's only interested in themselves, or are you interested in a team win, or are you interested in the company winning? The way I look at it, what the topic is that we're talking about is just expanding that circle to, can you see a situation where you're winning, your team is winning, your company is winning, the community is winning, the environment is winning, and just making the win bigger, okay? Because it's always comes down to this. Do I create value for the shareholders and make profit, or no, I act responsibly? That is not the right question. Because in the end, the whole essence of leadership is balancing lots of different priorities to find the sweet spot where lots of different things are wins. To make profit and do something good for the team and the people, and do something good for the environment, and do something that improves the lot of the well-being of the humans around you and the animals and everybody else. That is the art, not the art of, okay, I know my priority is to make money, and by the way, because it's my priority, it's my only priority. No, we all have lots of different priorities, and balancing those priorities is what the leader's supposed to do, not just for themselves, but for the team, for the way that he projects or she projects. What are our vision? What is our mission? What is our strategy? And therefore, what is our way forward? So I think for me, it's really important not to get into that either or question, because that is rubbish. That is not true. You know, it's not as simple as that. Okay, so why don't people do this? People don't do this because they're not really clear what legacy they want to leave behind, because people are becoming very silo mentality. And this is only the area I'm interested in, not the rest of it. And they think very short term. These are the main reasons why sustainability strategies fail. And companies, I mean, again, this is very much in line with the lecture last week. You can make profit in the short term and go out of business. And if that's what your objective is, then, you know, responsible leadership is not necessarily as important for you. But if, as Stephanie said, you want to go for a longer term business, create a global long-term brand that creates that legacy, then no, you need to think about the context of the wider impact you and your business is making on the world. So I want to talk about one item before Jim joins at 1:30. That one item that I want to talk about is diversity. Now, diversity is just one element, like we talked about it. But I think for me, diversity is a really good example, because everywhere that I look, when people talk about diversity, they are being pushed to do something about diversity. They're being forced to do something about diversity. It's becoming important to the shareholders. It's becoming important to the government. It's becoming important to the talent, to everybody there, that you are seen to create diversity. So what do? The CEOs come to me or to go to Stephanie and others saying, okay, help me put something in the annual report that says that I've hired more ethnic minorities, I've hired more women, I've hired more disabled people, or whatever. But like we said about change last week, change is only successful where you've created a pool where people actively want to have a diverse team, but not just that, a diverse team that's just the starting point, but have an inclusive culture because they see the benefit of it to themselves and to their own win, and to the win of their team and the win of their company and the win of the community around them. If you create the will for change, then diversity is not a matter of principle. Diversity becomes good business. And I'm here to tell you that diversity is a perfect example of how doing the right thing is also good business. It's not either or. It really never is. If you look at what do we mean by diversity, it's about appreciating others who bring something new and different. It's about race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, age, physical ability, social. It could be about anything. It could be what companies you are recruiting from, what industries that people are coming from, their normal style. We talked about style. Remember when we talked about teams? Do you have a right balance between those? And then having an inclusive culture where all those people can add value to you, like we talked about with the team. Because your team isn't just your employees, it's also your suppliers. It's also the people in the regulatory from the government. It's also your competition even. When you're trying to open up a new market or compete against another technology or increase the size of that market, your competition could be part of your team. And really being beyond that, I'm going to do the minimum because I'm being forced to do it. By looking at why you should do it. And there's loads of reasons. It drives long-term business success, and I will show you how that does that. It creates a much bigger talent pool. Remember, we talked about this, and I'm going to demonstrate that to you now. And I'm only going to talk about gender because we need to look at examples to illustrate this. But, you know, we constantly talk about, you know, companies not being able to fill the vacancies because they're failing in the talent war. But that's only because they're looking at a very narrow type of person. How they create synergies and break silos within teams. How they improve the engagement, how they become an employer of choice with the right employer brand where people want to work for them, how your customers' profile is being reflected by your employees. Can you imagine what happens when your employees are not the same as your customers? They don't understand what your customers want, how your customers think. And of course, a wider social brand, how your brand is perceived, and of course, hitting your requirements of the legislation and the rules. Stop me at any point. I'm going to go quite fast on this because I think we've talked about this before. And in the end, it's about inclusion. Starting point is diversity. Unless you've got diversity, you can't have inclusion. But the benefit doesn't come from diversity. The benefit comes from inclusion. Let me give you a quick story. When I joined Ojan, the old HR director who stayed there, and I came on on top of him, Ahmed, who'd been there 24 years. He said to me, well, look, we've got a lot of issues, but you don't have to worry about diversity. So why is it? Oh, we've got 24 different nationalities working here. So, oh, really? Okay. If I told you that every single person running our production lines were Bangladeshis, but every single maintenance operator was Filipino. Every single person in the IT team was Indian, not just from India, but from Kanai, and not just from Kanai, from a particular village in Kanai. And these people worked in silos. None of the maintenance people helped the Bangladeshi operators run lines when they needed them. They didn't help them. They didn't make suggestions. They were a different team. They were playing in for different wings. When I went to say I want to recruit other nationalities for the IT team, the IT director, who was himself Indian from Kanai, came into the middle of the office and he started screaming that I was racist, that I was anti-Indian, and that I was, you know, I had something against them. And I had to deal with that. And we had to fire him. And we brought in an IT person and created a diverse team. In my own team, in that same company, to set the example, I had a Russian, I had a Ukrainian, I had a Dutch, I had a Scots, I had Jordanian, I had Palestinian, I had a Saudi, I had an Iranian, I had Filipinos, I had Bangladeshis, I had Sri Lankans. I had a whole mix of people who reported to me. And it was a wonderful, wonderful team. And you know, everybody worked together because we didn't create these silos. And they were involved in decision making as you know, they learned how the new culture was going to operate. So it's really, really practical and real reason. And why? Why is it important? There is no shortage of reports and research that prove that business bottom line is improved with inclusion once you have diversity. Bain have done a report that find a 95% correlation with financial performance of having an inclusive team. And you know, there's a lot of statistics in here, but and you can look at that, of course, because McKinsey's report looks at, for example, what proportion of this business decision making is improved when you improve the gender diversity, what proportion improves when you create ethnicity, and what proportion improves when you bring in people's backgrounds. You can see that in the bottom chart. But this is a better illustrator, which is the Bain research. 87% improvement in business decision making once you add the multiplier of age diversity, gender diversity, geographic diversity. 87%. 37% improvement in the bottom line. That's massive, massive. So why don't people do it? Why is it still being forced on people? You know, we can't recruit. We haven't got enough people. Oh my God, the people we want to recruit, everyone's after them, so they become seriously expensive. Really? Look at this chart. Remember the story I told you about recruiting women returners for the bank instead of young men from the best universities and the impact that had on the business performance? 46% of the employees of Fortune 500 companies are women. Well, that's wonderful news. But 70% of the household expenditure is decided by women. And of course, they're 50% of the world population. And the estimate, this is old now, $20 trillion is how much women spend. And yet, only 4% of the Fortune 500 companies have women leading them. Only 8% of the top earners in those companies are women. Only 17% of board members. Only 10% of the world's income is controlled by women. What does that mean? That means right the way through the talent pipeline, they're falling out. They're falling out. This is from McKinsey. And what's the impact of them falling out? It means you're losing talent. There's a leakage of good people, of diversity, of a different way of thinking. Who's going to lose out? Men lose out. You know, whenever I present this, I'm always conscious that in the audience, there's some Western men who think that all of this is eroding their chances. I want to say this. The whole team is going to be successful with diversity, including the men, including the white men. And by the way, why not just say that? There's research that shows that most of them are tall white men. Yeah, seriously. So what? You're not going to lose out. Everyone's a winner in this situation because the business wins, because your team wins, unless you don't think you're part of the team, in which case, why are we talking about you? Who cares? Look at that. It's shameful. It really is. Now it's improving. It's improving. But really, I mean, in Ojan, I increased the number of women by 300%. And not just that, our CFO became a woman, you know, chief purchasing manager became a woman, you know, senior positions. You know, my secretary there is now the HR director. You know, it's just, you need to make sure that you remove the reasons why things are not happening. And by the way, a lot of the technology companies, they're not that much better. And you would think that that industry is the futuristic, thinking ahead, that they would be better than the rest. They're not. There's challenge everywhere. In fact, it's very interesting that in certain cultures that you would normally think are very advanced, like, for example, the Dutch in Netherlands. In Netherlands, only 3.18% of the board positions are filled by women. Only 13% of companies think that's a problem. They're equal to Pakistan on the number of women in executive positions. And yet, in Turkey, the biggest companies run by women, the Sabancı Group. In Saudi Arabia, my #1 competition, the Alliance Group, the biggest FMCG business, run by women, a woman. You go to companies in Iran, the best directors, the best managers are women. 65% of the engineers are women. Same in China, I'm sure. Same in lots of countries now. So there's an image and there's reality. There's certain countries that are leapfrogging and improving things faster than maybe the old industries in the West, who are no longer the benchmark, no longer the best practice. We're now thinking next practice, and that's China. That's some of these countries. That's India. Not always good, but not always bad either. So here's some of the reasons. So why aren't we, and there is not one single factor in here that you can't change, that you can't improve. It's all a matter of perception. The more examples you have, remember the wheel that we talked about, the wheel of change? Imagine this in the wheel of change. You have the symbolic, the role models, you have the communication and the storytelling, the narrative of why it's important. You then have the systems, policies, and processes to make sure it's all being reinforced and make sure that everything is driving the same change that you want. And then you have capability building, training, and capacity building. You put all of that together, you could easily move this. I have moved this. It's all doable. And, you know, we talk about how flexible are you? Why do we want everyone to be a full-time employee? Why can't we allow some people to be part-time, to be temps, to be free agents when their situation demands it? Because they can still give you value. I will tell you that all the part-timers that ever worked for me were bringing value way above their contracted hours. So 2 50% part-timers is not equal to 1 full-timer. Is at least equal to 1.5 full-timer. So, you know, thinking outside the box, thinking broadly about what is it we're talking about here? Why should we have restrictions? Why can't we be more flexible to accommodate the diverse talent that we want to have? that the decision-making processes, lots of decisions, for example, when I worked in a company in Italy, happened in the bar in the evenings. You go to the pub afterwards, and by the way, a lot of decisions are made there over a few drinks. And you'll hear that with people talking about golf courses. You'll hear that with people talking about going skiing with those guys or whatever. And this is where we make the network deliver decisions for us. Well, why should it? You can change all of that. And it's right that we should change it. It's no longer fit for purpose because you're excluding people who have value to add and you're retaining people who are more like yourself. Remember what we talked about in teams. You might enjoy being with people who are more like you, but they're not the ones bringing the biggest value to you because you already have that perspective. You already have that skill. You want people who are different to you. But the different people are not going to be wanting the same activities. They're not going to want to go to the same places. You have to engineer the situation where those people are able to be included, able to add value to you. Really, really important. And finally, it's often started with the job. This is the job, this is how I designed the job. And it's so much of it is based on the last person who did the job, as opposed to thinking outside the box. How many of us go and ask our employees whether they think their job is written right? Because we are the boss, we told them what the job is. How many of us go and say to them, look, do you want to rewrite your role profile? Do you think you be able to add more value? Do you think you should be responsible for something else? Let's have a conversation about it. We don't have to agree. I can always agree at the end and say no or yes. But let's decide that. Let's have a conversation. Can you add more value if you change something about your job? And yes, there will be negotiation about resources. There'll be negotiation about grades. There'll be negotiation about, how big a team they have. Yeah, but those are conversations that's best to happen. Because if they don't happen, they're still in the person's mind. They're just not saying it to you, but it's still affecting how they make decisions. It's still affecting what they do. Now, I want to move on from here to the next thing I want to talk about, which is how do you measure that you're being successful at being a responsible leader? Because at the end of the day, remember the model. You have a vision. I want my company, I want to be the most admired company. That's very commonly used. I want a company that not only creates value for the shareholders, but also creates value for everybody that touches us. That's a common thing that is written into the value statements. And then you bring it down into, okay, how do we do that? That's our mission. Through this, through being ethical, through being responsible. And then you have strategies. Strategies, the how-to. This is how we're going to go from where we are to delivering this vision. But how do you know that you've achieved it? How do you know what good looks like? How do you know when you have got to the place that's your vision? You can only do that through measurement. The KPIs are key performance indicators, so measures. And having a dashboard is absolutely essential because this is a famous saying in Britain. We always say this. You get what you inspect, not what you expect. And people's behavior is such that you very clearly are behaving and making decisions in order to deliver what you feel you're responsible for. We talked about that. And what you're responsible for are these KPIs. Here's where the KPI is now. Here's what I've said and I've promised I'm going to move it to. How far along have I gone? And the idea of this balanced scorecard, I don't know if you've come across it before, is that it's a very clear range of measures that define your strategy into things that you could measure, that you could test. How far away are we? It's simple. It's something that is currently maybe not being measured, but you need to measure it. The quality of the measure is important. few but really key measures is the thing. And really, you don't want distortion. Averaging is always such a danger. You want to see the reality of what's going on. So they need to be both quantitative and qualitative, and also benchmarked against the best practice outside. So you measure them both in terms of where are we today and how far have we moved it internally, but also where are we compared to the competition? Where are we compared to what best looks like? Now, most of the time, this section is taught in financial control because it goes into your balance sheet. But I think it's essence of leadership, because the leader needs to be able to show the results and celebrate those results. Use the results to create that brand that we said that shows that you're serious, that you've really done it. So the assumptions are that all the different functions come up with the KPIs and you pull it together. And that there's a hierarchy of measures, with the lead measures that are strategic, then the tactical measures that are around the key strategies you move for, and the operational measures. And the operational measures are the inputs, the things that have changed, that have done, that drive the strategic KPIs. There's a line of sight, as the auditors say. There might be KPIs that are kept in common, but there should be one person who's responsible overall. And there might be functional KPIs. Like I said, often the diversity is given as a objective to HR. Whether you agree whether it should be HR or whether it should be everybody's or whether it should be CEOs, that's another story we can discuss. But often they're functional ones. And there will be different ones in the balance. And I'll explain why we call it the balance scorecard. The lead indicators are the ones that tell you the big strategic ones, but there will be others that are driving that. You know, for example, you would say we need successes for our top team within the next 2 to 3 years. But then the indicator is how many high potentials do we recruit at the junior level who have gone through the assessment, have been found to be high potential, because that's feeding that system. Unless you do that, you won't get the other. So that's how it works. It's the same with financial performance. You say, this is our EBIT. Okay, so what was the sales and what was the cost of sales? What was our purchasing cost? What was our manufacturing cost? You know, the lead indicator is the profitability or share value. But the ones feeding it is sales and costs. And it's very much down in this, you know, where are we? Are we along the way? Are we failing? Are we going backwards? Are we doing better than expected? So here's where we are. Here's where we want to go, step by step. So year by year, quarter by quarter, whatever. How far along are we? Why is it working? Why isn't it working? Should we celebrate the big success? Should we do something to stop the negative? And when we talk about balance, it means looking at the holistic impact that you as a leader are having. Yes, market position. Are our products what's our market share? Are they increasing? How much is our brand love? How much is the indicator of the customers referring us or promoting our brand to others? Financial values would be easy ones, you know, EBIT, profitability, revenue, costs, margins, working capital, human capital. What's our turnover of people? What's the cost? Now, here's the thing. Often people don't use ratios. I always use ratios. So what is our manpower cost as a proportion of our revenue? Where was it last year? Where is it today? How much of our people cost is fixed? How much of it's variable? You know, basic salaries, performance pay, for example. What's our turnover of employees? What's the absenteeism? Those are really good indicators. Operational effectiveness is how fast did we get the product to the customer? How much wastage did we have in our system? And then wider aspects. What's our global energy footprint? You know, what's the view of the community of us? How much brand love is there in our immediate community? How sustainable have we been? So I'll give you some examples I've done. I mean, this is what I designed for the gas company. And it was a direct drop down from their strategy. Hi, Jim. How you doing?
Hi there, Masood.
I'm
I'm
just
well, how are
finishing
you?
off on this, and then it's all yours.
Sure thing.
So, you know, having very few but very clear measures of what you're trying to achieve is the way to ensure that your stated objective and vision is reality. And in that, you can create a balance that shows that your impact overall is creating reality of what responsible means. Responsible for what? How are we going to know? And these are all examples, of course, but you know, there are templates and whatever. We can talk about all that going forward. But we are almost dead on time for Jim to talk to us at 1:30. We're really doing well on timings this time, right on the button, because all of this requires us to be individuals that are consistent, that you carry your stakeholders with you. Remember what we said last week about change management. You know, are you aligned? Are those people with you on the journey you want to make? Are they going to be supportive of you? Are they going to be helping you achieve your vision? And it's a matter of trust and how you build trust. And that's what I wanted Jim to come and talk to us about. Jim and his colleagues are experts in discussing the philosophy of ethics, of what does it mean for a leader to act ethically. And ethics are quite important because that is one of the key elements that allows everybody in the system, including the employees, to have trust and want to follow that leader, especially if they share the same ethical values. I have worked for people where their belief system was contrary to mine, and the amount of energy you lose managing that environment is phenomenal. The amount of energy you gain when your principles and your belief systems are aligned with the company you're working for, and especially the boss you're working for, is massive, massive. So it's really important we understand what that actually means. And Jim's going to talk to us about that. So
Thanks, Masood.
Over to you, Jim.
Great stuff. Brilliant. I'm very impressed with your timing, Masood. That is very impressive. To the minute, almost. That never happens. Very good. And even more impressed with your shirt. It's a gorgeous shirt. Anyway, thanks very much for inviting me along today. So I'm here to talk about integrity and leadership. So if you just give me a moment, I'm going to share my screen. Just a second. Here we go. Okay, is this working okay? It's probably not right. Hang on a moment. Yeah, is that all right? Yeah, good stuff. Okay. Actually, I think I'm sharing the wrong one. Sorry about this. I'm gonna try again because I think I was not sharing that. Oops. Okay, here we go. We'll try once more. Okay, here we go. So this is the one I meant to share. There we go. Sorry, I'm spoiling all your wonderful timing by taking ages to get set up. Anyway, here we are. So I'm here to talk about integrity and leadership. So as Masood said, I'm from a centre, well, it's called Interdisciplinary Ethics Applied. It would probably be Applied Ethics, except you wouldn't get the nice acronym then. So we're the IDEA Centre. And we are, as Masood said, we're philosophers. So we are philosophers specialising in ethics. So we specialise in thinking about the ethical issues that arise within a variety of different practice areas, including business, but we do teaching in engineering the School of the Environment and medicine and dentistry and all over the university really. But my job is as a consultant. So I do training and continuing professional development activities, and I also do applied research projects. So where we're asked to do research to answer a question of practical importance to people working in industry. And I'm going to talk about some of the findings from one piece of research that we did for the ICAW, the Chartered Accountants professional body, and that was into integrity and leadership in organizations. I also do my own research, by the way, and just to kind of show you that I'm also interested in sort of the other side of the coin. I recently published a book on psychopaths. So I'm interested in moral responsibility and psychopaths. So it's not particularly psychopaths in a business environment, although there are people doing some really interesting research on that, right? And I'm sure Masood could tell you about, you know, some people that he's worked for who might find themselves on the psychopath scale. I'm not sure, but yeah, we'll see. Anyway, so integrity and leadership is the subject A. So this is the research that I'm going to draw what I'm talking about from. As I say, it was for the ICAW, the Chartered Accountants. It was mixed methodology. So we did some philosophical work, some quantitative work, and some qualitative work. So we did a survey, a large scale survey of chartered accountants working in various organizations. And then we followed that up with some one-to-one interviews. And for me, actually, that was the most interesting part of the research, because I got to go in and talk to, well, it ended up being 94 people, I think, within 15 organizations, ranging from the very large to the very small. So the biggest organization we spoke to was a very large retailer, which you all would have heard of. I'm not allowed to say who it was. And down to a very small professional firm with only sort of 2 or 3 people working for it. And we were asking questions about integrity. You know, what does integrity mean to you? Can you give examples of people who you've known who've had integrity and haven't had integrity, and what effect that's had on the culture of the organization, and what it was about those people that made you think they either did or did not have integrity. So part of what we were doing was really trying to get to grips with what integrity really means, because that might sound like a simple question, but I think integrity is something that loads of people think is very important. So if you go on anybody's corporate website, really, or any professional body's code of conduct, or anybody's list of organizational values, you'll just almost always find integrity in there somewhere. And there'll generally be some kind of attempt to explain what they mean by integrity, and it'll say things like, we do the right thing, or we act honestly, or whatever. And it's really just kind of bringing in some fairly simple ethical kind of commandments that are fairly uncontroversial and really don't tell you all that much about what to do in practice. But there is some work on integrity that's been done in philosophy, which tries to really get under the bonnet of what integrity means, but also why it's an important quality, and why we might think that it's something a bit more than just being a good person or acting honestly or something like that, why there might be something a bit more specific that we would want to say integrity is, and why it's a good quality for people to have. And we were interested in why it's a good quality for people to have in general, but also in organizations. So what's the value of integrity within organizations? And it's that kind of part of the research that I'm going to draw on today. So starting with the philosophical work, and then we explored that in the interviews that we did with people, and explored that concept with reference to examples and so on. So just quickly, just a couple of kind of empirical findings from the research, which are not that surprising, but which are worth noting, I think. Tone from the top was the most consistently cited factor in promoting a culture of integrity in the organization, and a significant factor in whether people saw their organization as having a culture of integrity. So that's to say, people thought it was important, but actually when you checked it against, whether it had a real tangible effect on the organization, it turned out that they were right, and it genuinely was important. And that was something that we found in the research. And there was lots of examples that came out of that research of what happens when leaders do or do not have integrity. I'm sure you can imagine, people were very keen to talk about both the positive and negative examples with us. So it led to quite a lot of interesting, rich results. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick kind of canter through philosophical accounts of integrity, and then I'm going to just finish up by trying to apply those to leadership and say what those imply for leadership specifically. So the first account that we're going to look at is one which is attributable to Harry Frankfurt, who was a philosopher, but it's also, it's the one that kind of comes out of thinking about literally what integrity means. So if you look up the dictionary definition of integrity, you'll find that the origin of the word is in a Latin word, integer, which means whole, right? So it is in some sense a quality of wholeheartedness, of wholeness, of character. And the way this manifests itself is in consistency of word and deed, right? So on this kind of account, somebody with integrity, they will not say one thing and do another. So from what they say, you can predict what they're going to do. They will have consistency between what they say and what they do. And in that sense, it's similar to the concept of authentic leadership, which is, as you know, to be found in the business literature, in which Masood's already been talking about. So in this sense, people with integrity are kind of genuine, they're self-aware, and they're transparent. Yes, and above all, they're consistent. But what do we think that quality of consistency is all you need to have integrity? Well, here's one reason to question that. And this is a character vignette that we used in the interviews that we did. And so we've got the example here of Barbara. So it says, Barbara freely admits to being a selfish person. She rarely, if ever, considers her friends or anyone else when deciding how to act, and is completely open about this. You can completely rely on Barbara in all circumstances to only think of herself. So Barbara there has consistency, right? She has consistency of word and deed. She doesn't, pretend she's one thing and then act like another thing. She is how she describes herself. So she has that consistency. And in the sense of integrity that we've just been talking about, she appears to have integrity in that sense. But does she really have integrity, or does she merely have consistency? Do we really want to say that Barbara has integrity? So we asked people this in the interviews, and actually it was kind of 50-50. So we'd started by asking people what they thought integrity was, and they often mentioned consistency. And then you bring in Barbara, and half of the people kind of go, well, yeah, I think she probably does. I might not sort of like her, I might not admire her, but yeah, if I think integrity is about consistency, I sort of have to conclude that Barbara does have integrity. Half of the people actually say, no, not really. She's consistent, but this is making me wonder whether mere consistency is what integrity really is. So this also concerned another philosopher called Lynn McFall, and in her paper Integrity, which is a really good paper, if you have time to check it out, so I'd recommend it, she says, well, look, it may be thought that internal coherence is required for integrity, so that there's no contradiction in speaking of the integrity of an Iago or of a Machiavelli. Okay, so sort of villains from literature and history. On the other hand, it seems odd to speak of a loss of integrity in the failure to lie, scheme, and murder, or in general, the failure to be ruthless. But if internal coherence were sufficient for integrity, then internal incoherence would be the only way it could be lost. So imagine you have an openly, consistently ruthless leader in your organization, someone who, only cares about the bottom line, doesn't care about the impact of their decisions on anybody, and they're completely honest about that. They just say, that's the way I do business. And then they take a decision which actually contradicts that. And, you know, for once, they do consider the impact of their decision, and they consider other people and take other people into account in a decision that they make. Well, it looks like if you think that integrity is just coherence and consistency, then they've lost their integrity by doing that, by taking what looks like a better decision, you know, all told. They've actually lost their integrity. But do we really want to say that? Well, McFaul thinks not. And based on that thought, partly, McFaul moved to a different conception of integrity, which we could call the moral identity conception. And that also can be found in the work of another philosopher, Bernard Williams. So according to this idea of what integrity is, people with integrity are motivated kind of not just by their beliefs, but by deeply held moral commitments that are identity conferring. So if you want to call it integrity, it doesn't just have to be consistent. It also has to be consistent on the basis of deeply held moral commitments that you won't give up easily, right? And this tries to get tries to kind of cast light on why we think of integrity in terms partly of our sense of self. So you often, if you hear people talk about, well, I didn't want to do that because I would have lost my integrity, there's a kind of sense in which they're saying I would have lost, you know, my sense of myself. I wouldn't be able to kind of think of myself as being the same person if I did something which was against one of my deeply held values. And McFaul gives an example of friendship as potentially one of these commitments, these deeply held commitments. So she says, if we betrayed a friend in order to advance our careers, we couldn't live with ourselves. We would not be the persons we thought we were. This is what it means to have a core, a set of principles or commitments that makes us who we are. Such principles cannot be justified by reference to other values because they are the most fundamental commitments we have. So if you thought of yourself as, you know, being a good friend is you know, it's just part of what makes you who you are, and then you betrayed a friend, then you would in some way kind of lose the right to think of yourself in that way. And that would be what it means to lose your integrity for McFaul. So it's about consistent acting on the basis of moral commitments. Okay, but you know, maybe we can bring up another example that might kind of put a bit of pressure on that idea. And so again, this was a character vignette that we used in the interviews, and we asked people what they thought about. So Klaus lives in Germany in the 1930s. He's a dedicated member of the Nazi Party, and he fully signs up to all of its central beliefs and principles. When he finds out that his own brother is involved in a plan to help Jews and other subversives escape Germany, he's very upset. But after wrestling with his conscience, he decides reluctantly that he has to inform on his brother to the Gestapo, not because he stands to gain personally from doing so, but because he believes it's the right thing to do. Now, does Klaus have integrity? And the question of whether Klaus has integrity highlights a theoretical question, which is, well, integrity is about sticking to our deeply held values for people like McFaul and Williams. But does it matter what those values are? Because Klaus looks like he has values, right? He has what at least he takes to be moral values. He's not just consistent. He is consistent on the basis of these deeply held commitments. And therefore, you might think on McFaul's account, he is going to turn out to have integrity. Do you think Klaus has integrity? Again, we asked people in the interviews what they thought. And again, you know, people were quite split about that. Some people thought, yeah, you know, I'm afraid I do think that he has integrity. And it seems like, you know, maybe we might want to bite the bullet and say that Klaus has integrity, because we do presumably want to be able to say, I don't agree with what you're doing. I don't agree with the views that you express, but I can see that you have integrity. I can see that you're, in this sense, saying those things and doing those things on the basis of what you take to be important commitments, and you're doing so consistently. So maybe we do think that Klaus has integrity. I mean, a lot of people didn't want to say that. A lot of people, you know, found that idea kind of repellent and said, well, no, it's not just any commitments. You know, there has to be, there are some commitments that are just kind of beyond the pale when it comes to integrity. We don't think that those people have integrity, but as many people said that he did. If we do think that someone like Klaus has integrity, I'm going to leave that as an open question, and maybe you can tell me what you think. And if we do think that he does, notice that we also have to accept that integrity is only a good thing if it's based on good values, right? So we might actually, when we look at a case of someone like Klaus, we might prefer him not to have integrity. If he didn't have integrity, you know, the outcome for most people would be a better one. So actually, maybe it's better if some people don't have integrity, which is kind of it's a counterintuitive conclusion, at least if you think that integrity is an important value or an important virtue. You might wonder whether we can accept that outcome. There's another issue with the idea of integrity as moral identity, and it's the same. The same thing applies really to the mere consistency account, and it's that this account of integrity is quite inward looking. So we all think that it's really important for people to have integrity, but do we think that because we're really concerned about the kind of internal state of their character? We really care that they are true to their own commitments? Why should that matter so much to other people? Why should that matter to me, whether you have integrity? So this, in a sense, this idea of integrity looks a bit inward looking. And is there a way that we can capture something a bit kind of broader about integrity, and perhaps a bit more outward looking? Yes, and most importantly, does it capture what we think is valuable about integrity? Does it capture why we think it's really important for people to have integrity? So Cheshire Calhoun, another philosopher, thought that kind of account of integrity can't really make sense of why we think integrity is important. And she thought we need to think about integrity not just as an individual virtue, but as a social virtue. And she described the way that people with integrity represent their values within what she called the community of reasoners, and can thereby influence others. So it's not just that people with integrity are true to their own values, but it's that by demonstrating their commitment to their own values, by acting in line with those values, even when it's not convenient and might be very difficult for them to do so, and even when they might have to lose something by doing that, they can demonstrate how important those values are. And by doing that, they can influence other people around them. So the next time somebody, you know, who's kind of seen that makes a decision that potentially involves one of those values, they've got that example to work with. And she called that process standing for something, right? So integrity, she thought, was not just about being true to your own values, but it's standing for something within a community of people. And you can see how that might work within an organization, right? And perhaps that partly explains why we think the integrity of leaders is so important. It's not just that they're true to their own values, whatever those values happen to be. It's that they represent those values and they influence other people to take up those values. And then therefore they can actually have an important influence on the culture of the organization in which they're working. Again, notice that it only works if the values that they represent values, right? And you could imagine somebody standing for bad values within an organization and having a profound influence on that organization, but it wouldn't be a good one. So again, it's only a good thing if the values represented are good values. Okay, just to sum up then. So I've introduced three separate accounts of integrity, which emphasize kind of different aspects of the value or the virtue of integrity. What does this say about leadership, which is what we're concerned with here today? Well, firstly, it's true that we want leaders to be authentic, right? We want them to have integrity. We generally want them to have integrity. But when authenticity and even integrity are discussed in the literature, the emphasis is often on effectiveness. And the thought that leaders with these qualities are just good at exerting influence, and good at inspiring people. So they're effective leaders because, you know, maybe there's an alignment between their values and the values of the people who are working for them, or just because they kind of have charisma, or that they're, you know, they have their influential characters. They're very good at exerting influence, which is essentially what leaders do, I suppose. But the discussion of integrity suggests that integrity is not all you need, at least if what we're looking for is ethical leadership. So it also matters what values you're demonstrating. It's not just that you demonstrate them consistently and are seen to do so, but it really matters what those values are. And there are some sets of values which are perhaps more desirable than others. And it suggests also that if leaders remain true to good ethical values, those values influence their actions. So, you know, your own values influence your own actions if you're acting consistently with your values. But they're also able to have a broader influence within the culture. So part of what leaders do is not just inspire people to follow them in whatever they're trying to do, but it's also they spread ethical values within the culture of the organization in which they're operating. So that process of standing for something is also an important reason why we might think that integrity is desirable. That's it. Okay, so I've left a few minutes for questions, hopefully. So yeah, I'd be interested to hear what you think.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jim. Questions, anyone, team?
Stunned silence.
Sometimes when people are on Zoom, you need to give them a little bit of time to unmute. While we wait for that, Jim, one of the things we talked about yesterday was this concept of ethical values, and the fact that unless it's costing the individual something, then it's not really a value. So, I mean, I've had situations like you described, where during the Iranian Revolution, certain very close members of my family decided to take their own father and into arrest because they were pro-Shah, or tried to actually arrest their own brother who would have been executed, you know, and you know, the brother actually ran away. But you know, those are unpleasant tasks that the person did because they actually felt their, you know, need to support the revolution in some way or form. Whether it happens for religion, whether it happens for politics, it makes no difference. But they thought they were taking an ethical stance. But actually, you know, when you look at it, it's the cost of it to a large extent, well, within the context of that particular point in time. And later on, they regret that decision, and later on, they sort of pay reparations for it to an extent, you know. There's a time element to this. It's not absolute in any way, shape, or form.
I mean, that's a you know, that brings it home. We use the example of Klaus as a sort of hypothetical example, but obviously,
no, I've got actual examples of family members I didn't talk to for 24 years of what they did during the revolution, and you know, and now we're friends and back as a family, and you know, those things were real. You know, people were executing their own brothers. You know, these things happen, and again, politics, religion, all of those things are incredibly strong emotional connections to a given value system, if you like, that then drives particular decisions, which in the light of day seem reprehensible, but actually were done because you thought you were a moral person.
I think on the kind of general point about values and what it means to have values, I think the word values is kind of bandied around quite a lot without people really thinking about what it actually means. So, and what our values are basically just the things that we think are important, right? But we don't demonstrate what we think is important by saying we think it's important. We demonstrate it by being willing to pay a price for it, right? So we think it's important, and we show that we think some things are important to a certain extent by you know, measuring it against something else and saying, no, this is more important, so I'm going to stick to this. Right. So if you think about like what it means for an organization to have values, it's not just for it to have a list of these words on its website that all sound lovely, and maybe a few posters and things like that. It's, you know, what actually is demonstrated to be important within that organization. And one way of looking at that is kind of what makes things go well for people within the organization. You know, what is valued within the organization. You know, what forms of behavior are going to make things go well for you if you're in that organization. You know, so by sticking up for your principles, are you going to get kind of sidelined for promotion, or are you going to get sort of ostracized or just kind of shoved aside? Or is that going to make things go well for you? Is it going to be valued by people in that organization? And that's the kind of question that allows you to see whether there's a match between the stated values of the organization and its actual values. That is, what is actually valued within the organization.
I've seen some incredible examples. I mean, one of the things I would say is, I used to work for a company called Burton Group in the early 90s or late 80s, actually. And they said that they just didn't care about people, and they acted like that so that nobody was disappointed.
Yeah.
There was a gentleman called Ralph Halpin who was in charge, and his company culture, and he used to say it was JFDI, you know, just get it done, and I don't care how, and no rules apply. So nobody was disappointed by the way they behaved. However, when Vodafone was taken over, a very smooth talking American was eventually made CEO, group CEO. And that person talked so beautifully and set up such high expectations that when their behavior didn't match it, it was even worse than somebody who doesn't make those promises. And I remember at the time, my boss at the time was a lady called Anna Capitania, who's now HR director of BT for retail. She resigned. And she went to see the group CEO, who said, look, we can't afford to lose a talent like you. And she is. She's an incredibly talented person. And she said to him, you don't deserve a talent like me. And she left. And I can give you examples of people who have offered me jobs I've turned down because I thought, you know, they would be morally reprehensible and I couldn't work for those companies. And of course, nowadays we talk about whether you're willing to work for cigarette companies, whether you're willing to work for oil companies. And we had that in Coke, whether you're willing to work for companies that create products that create obesity or whatever else it might be. And these things are all about the cost that it gives you to live your values and to say, you know, to say no to something. It takes moral courage to say no. And I think for young talent, like the ones we're talking to, it's more important to know what to say no to than what to say yes to.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, definitely. Well, that's often where, what you genuinely value comes out more clearly, isn't it? Because it's generally easier to say yes to things than it is to say no to things. The consequences for you of saying no can be quite profound. I was talking to some people about examples this morning of where, you know, well, so a particular example where someone was asked to basically, and this was in their first job out of university, and they were a trainee accountant, and they were asked essentially to commit accounting fraud. Basically said that, you know, somebody said, we're going to submit these receipts to the client, but we need you to inflate them by a factor of like 150% before you present them. And you know, that's not a difficult ethical dilemma in the sense that it's clearly wrong. It's not just unethical, it's illegal, right? And you know, in any kind of case study discussion in an ethics session in the university, 100% of people are going to say, no, I would never do that. But when you're in that situation, it's your first job, you know, you're probably going to be sacked if you refuse to do it. What are you going to do next? You know, that's when
it's much more interesting to look at places where you are within the law, within the accepted way of doing things from a even society point of view. And yet you're breaking the golden rule. which is, you know, how you want you and yours to be treated, and how treating others, and how systems often allow you a way out. So whether the bankers, in the way that they transact business, in advise clients, or how they inflate their bonuses or whatever, whether they're acting in a moral way, the psychological story inside, because I mean, I deal with people who are, say, businessmen from bazaars, and you know that these people are inflating the prices and they're shafting some customers, and yet they go home and sleep well at night, and you talk to them and they're not bad human beings. But the inner dialogue is this. This is the world we're living in, and I'm just part of it, and this is how it's always happened. Why should I be the one that changes?
I'm not breaking any rules that often.
I'm not breaking any rules. What?
I mean, look at MPs' second jobs and conflicts of interest at the moment, right? The defense is very often, well, the rules don't say I can't do this, but it's it's clearly wrong. You know, you've clearly got a conflict of interest there, and how you thought that was acceptable is incredible.
Absolutely right. But I'll give you a wonderful story, and this is a true story, and I think might be fun for others to hear this too. When the revolution happened, a guy who was the biggest money lender in Tehran went to the mullah of Tehran, the one who leads the prayers, and said, all my income is immoral, and was against the tenets of Islam, because you're not allowed to charge interest and all the rest of it. So, and nobody wants to do business with me now that the society has changed and has become Islamified. I want to make all my assets halal. I want to make it all okay for me to have, and I want to rejoin society on the good side. What should I do? And the mullah says to him, right, it's very easy. You take everything you own and you take it to the central square in Tehran, Azadi Square, and you leave it on the side of the street at dawn, and at dusk, whatever's left is yours. And is fine. God is okay with it now. It would be fine. What this guy did was he sold everything he had, all his assets, and he bought gigantic iron girdles that were used this is a true story, for making skyscrapers. And he had these huge lorry go deliver them and drop them on the side of this square. And he photographed everything. And by the end of the evening, of course, nobody was able to lift a single thing. And he sold all that iron and got all his money back. And his money was, and it's the same mentality of people saying, I've done it within the rules. I'm okay. And it's the same mentality of why people throw rubbish on the floor. Look, everyone else is throwing rubbish. Why not me? Oh, if I wasn't throwing the rubbish, the street sweeper wouldn't get a job. Oh, if I wasn't, dropping it, someone would be dropping twice as much as me. You know, all that internal dialogue. And yet, I am convinced that most non-psychopathic human beings would have that conscience, that radar, that would say, I know I did wrong, but yet the system allows me to do wrong, and I'm going to abuse it for personal gain. And that is the fundamentals of what, for me, responsible leadership means. Because the system is stacked in the favor of the people in power to be able to do things that are morally not correct, to abuse and exploit resources, others, the planet, in every shape and form. And yet, your inner radar tells you when it's wrong. And your context, your situation, the group of people you're with, how they behave or whatever, drives whether you do or you do not, because your values are driven by the people that you associate with and the teams that you're with. Anyway, we're dominating this just in case there's other questions that are coming through, but it's a fantastic topic. Any other questions, anyone? Okay, Jim, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed it. And I think your topic is incredibly important to what we are talking about here. Hopefully we can have you come and talk to us in the future.
Thanks, I'd love to. And yeah, thanks for having me along, and thanks everybody for listening. And hope you enjoy the rest of the day. All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Right. In terms of what we are talking about here, I gotta say, in my experience, people know. As a leader, you know. It's not so complicated to say, right, am I being ethical? Am I being consistent? Or which one is it? Is it sincerity? Is it authenticity? Is it integrity? Is it values? It's you know. And when you go for the essence of responsible leadership is that you go for the big win where more people are winning than just you. And you make the right decision, and you make the right decision because you're interested in the long term. You're interested in the bigger win, a group win, a social win. And that's what will drive you. Okay, my system's hung again, so bear with me while I try to get out and get back in, and then hopefully we'll carry on with the rest. Just bear with me. Right, I'm back in. Okay, so let's go back to what we're talking about here. All right, is everyone okay so far? All good? You can see the slides? Just a thumb up would be great. Somebody just tell me you can see the slides. Yeah, can see the slides? Yes or no? Just anybody, just let me know you can see the slides. Good man. Thank you so much. I'm sorry, not man. Thank you so much. So we're talking about authenticity. Now, I have a friend, Andrew Monroe, who's the co-author of my book with me, who's a chartered psychologist. And for the last 20 years, he's been running a LinkedIn forum called Authenticity Forum. And it's about the authenticity of leaders. And he and I, we often have these discussions about authenticity and what does it mean? You know, exactly as Jim was saying, what if you're authentically bad? You know, how does that work? And so he's lent me some of his thoughts, some of his slides, which are not my slides, but I wanted to share them with you in terms of what they are. But there's no shortage of literature on this. It's become more and more important that people are actually really clear on what authenticity means as a leader. Because again, it all comes back to trust. You know, you only have followers who trust you, that want to follow you. How do you create trust? Because you're authentic, you're the real deal. And the word trust is in the first sentence. It's the imperative. You don't say, oh, this person is full of lies. I'm going to watch my back, and you can't trust what they say. You know, then you're not a true follower. How much access they give you to the reality is about how much trust there is. You know, are you somebody who's just like I've seen with others, you know, being very clever, sophisticated, but actually behind the curtains, what you're saying is different to what you're doing. How complex you're making things, how real is the experience. And here's some basic concepts. I mean, like everything else, I mean, you saw Jim going back to the ancient Greeks. This comes from an ancient Greek term for principle, for being genuine, authentic. It's about consistency between words and actions. It's about courage. It's about it costing you something. It's not the easy way that you took. It's about being part of who you are so you can sleep at night and you say, I am okay with me. Whereas if I did something different, I wouldn't be okay with me. It's not who I think I am. It is about facing up to the reality of this is what it is. The open and honesty and respect for maintaining something, but taking that as a guardian into the future. And what it isn't is about something vague, something I'm going to be better than everyone else. You know, I'm going to be uncompromising and inflexible in the way I do things. And, you know, this is what I wish to be, but I know we're not perfect. And, you know, I'm going to show it all and to the world. And by the way, this is going back to the good old days when people really were better than today. You know, these are normal things you hear all the time. But there is something very clearly linked to the idea of integrity, to something that is a distinct pole. Remember what I said about Cyrus at the beginning. You know, what would Cyrus do? You know, Christians would say, what would Jesus do? You know, this kind of thing, you know, a point that you can navigate yourself to. You know, I'm consistent with that. So because I'm consistent, you can actually trust me, because in the long run, I'm dependable. Most of the time, leaders that achieve authenticity come up with the natural self. This is who I really am. And I'm original. I'm a one of a kind, but I'm not trying to copy anyone. I'm not trying to pretend to be anyone. This is Masood. This is who you're seeing. And you know, I can prove it. Here's the actions. Here's the results. Here's the examples that I can illustrate actually my authenticity. And it's different. It's transformational. You can actually use it to plot your own way. And these themes are continuously coming through every bit of research about the originality, the personal equity that you put in, the personal cost, the belief, the consistency and the familiarity, and what you're driving there. And there's a lot of words in these slides, but they're all saying roughly similar things. Believe me when I tell you, when you see it, you know it. And when you don't see it, you also know it. It's an emotional thing for the follower and for everyone else who's observing the leader. But actually, it's not difficult to decide. In my experience, we can get very pedantic talking about this word or that word. You know, is this person being consistent, authentic, or sincere, ethical, whatever? But when you see something that doesn't feel right, you know it. And when a leader is doing something that you know is taking a balanced view of the impact in the world, you know it. I'll give you an example. We had a big debate when I was working for the gas company. Well, we didn't have a big debate, actually, that's the whole point. About whether we should have railings on the side of our lorries that would stop cars going under. Now, no other company was doing that. It wasn't a government regulation. It was going to cost us a lot of money. Consistently, every single person in the board, including the owner, said, this is a no-brainer, just get it done. No money, no consideration, don't want to publicize it to get a brand so that we are getting value out of this decision. Just do it right, because I don't want anyone dying on my watch. Speaking of dying, when I went into Vodafone Turkey, I had the group HR director come to see me and say, right, I know this is not strictly your area, but we've got to give you a target. And one of the targets we want to give you is we had 13 people die last year building the network, telecom network in Vodafone Turkey. 13 people. And this is more than the rest of the world put together. One of your objectives, in fact, your number one objective is from now on, no one is going to die building our network. And has nothing to do with the cost or your brand impact or whether the society expects it or doesn't. It's just part of the value system of the company and the value system of the people who are leading that company to say, I'm not going to have this happen to me on my watch. Those people have families, they have fathers, daughters, sons, mothers, whatever, and I don't want my mother or father or whatever having that feeling. Therefore, I don't want it for these people. And I don't care how much it costs. Get it done. And we did. There's a really many reasons why they were dying. So it was a very complex project, but we managed to deliver everything that was necessary to ensure 0 people dying or getting hurt building that. And it was a very clear moral position and responsible leadership. So how do you get that across? Most of the time, it's about the stories people tell about you and the stories that you tell to illustrate the point. That narrative paints the picture. And people then know what it means, what it looks like when it's done right. Believe me, if you work for a company where, as I said this before, your values, your belief system are in some way at odds with the leader of that company, the leader who's your boss, or the company in general, it sucks all the energy out of you, and vice versa. So having the right people join is absolutely key. And I'll talk about that in a moment. And where do you start? If you're authentic, you don't have to say I'm authentic. People should see it by your actions. If you say you're authentic, you better be. And I'll tell you a trick about this. Be careful of making absolute commitments. So as an example, the leader would get up and say, we're going to be fair in how we appoint people, how we promote people. We'll have all the jobs being advertised and everybody has a chance to apply for it. Okay, you're giving an absolute. If you live up to that value 99.99% of the time, but one time you appoint someone because they were a successor, you wanted them to get that experience before they got the big job, blah, 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 then everyone will say, look, that person's a liar. They said they would do this, they didn't do it. If you imagine you said, no, here's where we are, I'm going to increase the percentage of people who get a chance to apply for jobs. And you do, even by a few percentage, people's expectations are being met and you would be given the value for it. The absolutes are very difficult to hit. Be very careful of what you give, because that's where it says you're being authentic and then you're failing. And that's the worst case scenario. For somebody to say, look, I don't know, I know you don't like it, but this is what I'm going to do. And then you do it consistently. It's not as bad as saying that you're going to do something that people would think is great value and then you fail. So here's what we believe. Here's the action. This is there for my brand. Because this brand is what the brand does. And it's exactly the same for the leader. You are what you do, because you can't just go on marketing and brand forever. People will see the reality through actions and through the results. Maybe your brand will survive 1 or 2 hiccups, but longer term, your brand will be affected by the reality that's reported, that people have seen and talk about. If you want to take that whole idea of authenticity and take it to organizational level, then it's very simple. The general leaders and all the employees need to adhere to those same principles of authenticity. Yes, often it comes from the top. Well, not often. I think almost always it comes from the top. Many times from the owner or from the founder of the company, who sets the tone for the culture, for identity of who we are, what is our image of ourselves, therefore what actions do we do, how do we package that into the brand for our market, for our products, and for our employee brand, and then what does that mean in terms of our relationship with our stakeholders, with our employees, because they're different sides of the same coin. Outside in, inside out is what these slides were saying. You cannot have a separate belief system. That's how you treat the customers and the environment outside, and then treat your employees differently. The different sides of the same coin. Values inside, brand position outside. They must be consistent. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And there's consequences if you break that psychological relationship. If what you're saying is inconsistent, then customers think you're fake. They become cynical about you. Your employees become disillusioned. So consistency is a very important part of it. Congruency says here, but really consistency. And really look at who you really are. It's better to be a more authentic version of yourself than pretend to be someone else. Often you see these vision statements and mission statements by the companies, and they're too aspirational, too far away from the reality, too similar to everybody else's, so that they're not in any way unique. And they don't take into view the current position, even the good stuff in the current position. It's best for people to see something they can believe. It's the next step along in your evolution, not something that's way off. That never works. And I mean, I think that I've said this is about the inside out and the outside in. All right, so that's something about authenticity and integrity, which is absolutely core to responsible leadership that we were talking about. Do you remember when we were talking about types, and we were talking about different type of people who use different kinds of power? And I asked you guys, why do you want to be a leader? Look inside yourself. Be honest with yourself and say, why do I want to be a leader? Is it about me? Or is it about me wanting to do something, achieve something, leave a legacy, make some people great, create something that lasts? What is it? There are individuals out there who are just out for themselves and for the short-term win. And they're often not responsible leaders. They're not often the models of the examples we want to use. But let's look at that. What exactly is it that somebody wants to be a leader, wants to have that level of influence and impact and decision-making capability? And it comes down to what they're concerned about. Are they concerned about themselves, or are they concerned about some other issue? And it's what we talk about. It's the motive. What exactly is driving this person? Why do they want to lead? Why do they want to take that chance? And we call that the power motive. And there's two kinds of power motive. There's personalized power, which is all about me. These are what typically the narcissist, I want to have power. I want to have influence. I want to then get the benefits of it. I want to do things for myself. And actually, I enjoy other people being weak and losing. But it's social power. No. I want to step up because somebody needs to, if we want to achieve these wonderful results. If we want the company to win, I will step up because I can help make it real. And I could help the employees, and I could help the environment, and I could create a better community in general, and I'll build something that lasts. That's social power. And this is the definition from McClelland about what it means to have social power. It's the concern for a group goal rather than an individual goal. I often go to board meetings, and it's not difficult to see individuals who have their set personal agendas. That's all about them. It isn't. And we talk about responsible leadership is putting some of your personal goals aside to balance them against the winning of the team and all the other kinds of win. It's no different to that. The individual is no different to the organization. We were talking about balanced scorecard. Is it all about you or no? I want to win. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. You all want to be successful. You all want to make money. You all want to have status and power, all of that. That's all okay. The question is that to the exclusion of everything else? Or are you going for a bigger win? That's, yes, I want to win, but I also want the team to win. I also want the environment to win. I also don't want to hurt anything. I also want to leave a legacy, all the other things we talked about. And it's in that, this is the question where you realize you're the conductor. And what makes the group win is what drives you, rather than, no, I want to be the one that people look at. I'm the only one. Somebody who's got social power concerns is focused on the group goals, is focused on energizing the team to deliver that and facilitating that, helping the group, helping the group to drive it. And therefore, you would value other people's strength, other people's contributions that they bring, because it's not all about you. It's about you facilitating the team win. And there's lots of ways of doing that. And the symbols you use, the way your energy, your body language, it's all about me, or is it about the team? Do I listen? Do I show empathy? This is all about you learning how you make yourself the best version of yourself. And therefore, it's about trying, learning, and being better. And you educating yourself, educating others. This is the way. Modeling that behavior, being consistent, sharing examples, celebrating successes with the team, including everybody in decision-making, and making a very balanced view, like we said, balanced scorecard, balanced measure, balanced decision-making. And it shows that you got empathy. It really is underrated, empathy, putting yourself in other people's shoes, imagining what it would be like if you were them. It's a superpower. It really is superpower. And then acting with integrity, like we've been talking, being mature. Mature is balance. And then showing initiative, showing bravery. You have to continuously measure yourself. Think about monitoring yourself. Am I really being authentic? Am I being selfish? Be true to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. Understanding your energy and feeding that energy. I don't know whether you've heard the thing about, the good and the bad angels on your shoulder, or, inside your soul, the two wolves, the one that kills and the one that leads the pack. And they say, well, which one of those wolves that are fighting each other wins? And the guy says, the one you feed. The more of this you do, the more true to your best self you will be. And the more you're able to articulate this and bring other people, energize them, and take them with you, and enable the culture to be developed. So the first thing we've got to ask ourselves is, who am I? Why am I here? Why do I want to do this? What are the choices in front of me? And what do I feel my best self would decide? Okay, so that's the end of our lecture. I want to talk about the case study. I don't know how many of you guys read the case study, but it was about a mining operation in Congo that is using methodologies that would be seen to be inhuman and bad in getting the necessary material for making batteries for telephones and for other electric equipment. And a set of questions that I want to discuss in terms of how that fits in with responsible leadership. Who is responsible? What is the responsibility? What is the standard and the measure for that? A very quick story. When I first joined Ojan, I went to visit our oldest factory in Saudi Arabia, which was around for about 85 years. It was very old, but massive factory. And I met some of the employees and everything. And I said to the HR director there, I said, I want to go see the staff accommodation. I said, no, nobody ever goes to the staff accommodation. No, I want to see the staff accommodation. So they reluctantly took me, and I couldn't believe it. 16 people to a room, hot, sweaty rooms, bunk beds, 3 bunk beds on top of each other that they sleep in. And the state of the toilets, the state of the showers, the kitchen, oh my God, it was awful, 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 awful. And I said to the HR director, right, I want to call a general assembly of all the employees. Stop the lines. No, I don't care. 1,500 people. Pull them in. And I said, I want to apologize to you all. I'm ashamed. I'm sorry, and I'm going to fix it. Watch this space. And I took the photos and I went and sent it to the owner. And true to form, he didn't know anything about it. He'd never seen it. He didn't know. I said, are you happy having this happen in your name? Because you know what the people in the local area would say, oh, you don't know where these people live in their own home country, blah, 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 blah. I said, no, I want you to find accommodation that you think I will be happy to sleep in. And we did. You know, it took a while. I had to take personal charge, whatever. And in the end, the shareholder gave me cash to build our own staff accommodation. And if you look on LinkedIn or whatever, we year on year won the best staff accommodation in Dubai, in Bahrain, in Saudi. We had the #1 staff accommodation, the best by far. And what happened? Productivity went up, employee engagement shot up. Everybody wanted to work for us. Nobody wanted to leave. The cost of it, the benefit of it were immediate in business success. And morally, we did the right thing. It really is not about either this or that. That's not leadership. You have to be able to hit it all. So, you guys willing to have a go on this case study? What do we think is the answer to the first question? Do you think that what they were doing was violating guidelines? Do you think it was acceptable? Was it the right humane conditions? Is there a universal version of humane conditions? What do you think? Okay, if nobody wants to do the case study, we move on. It's fine. It's part of the learning experience, but this requires you to participate because it's a case study. Clearly, there's some factors in here that are very clear, relevant to the kinds of things we've been talking about whether there's the same standards for human well-being that's all around the world, or whether it's acceptable for people to be treated differently in different parts of the world. That's a fundamental question. I mean, I often think of it this way, that when people used to think about cheap manufacturing in China, and now that China is no longer the poor country and is a rich country, and the people are becoming richer, how that's moved to Africa. So was it okay for Chinese people to be exploited? And now, is it okay for Africans to be exploited? Are they different? Are they the same? For me, it's always about you, your measure inside. How do you want your family? How do you want you to be treated? It's the golden rule. It's not complicated. It really isn't. It never is. When things are not done right, you know it. You know it. And it's about not saying, okay, are we going to use mobile phones or not? You know, what happens if we stop this? It's not about, okay, we close the mine down and we make all those people starve to death by not having any work. No, but you really need to make the level of profits that you're making. Is that all there is? Can't you put some of that profit back into making the conditions more humane? Let me give you a case study. Amazon, making huge amount of money. Now, in the West, we don't use Alibaba so much. We don't use some of the other models. Amazon has total control over the online purchasing market. But once it became clear that they weren't paying their people a living wage, even in America, even in Europe, that they weren't giving people toilet breaks, so people would be wearing human nappies, adult nappies, so they would be able to go and toilet while they're standing up working, that they're giving the delivery people zero-based contracts so that they've got no rights as employees. It had a negative hit on their brand. And the amount of money this guy's making and the company's making, a fraction of that profitability fixed the problem. Fraction of that. In the end, it's not an either or. It really isn't. It's about balance, and it's about doing the right thing and moving along the continuum, making things better. This year we make it better. Next year we make it even better. And that's what it's about. Because in the end, this is how you measure it. It's how aligned are the leaders with the purpose that they say they are, understanding the downside and the risk you're running, reimagining a better future, experimenting, practicing, trying to make improvements. And all of that within the framework we talked about last week, from how you make change work, and evaluating that. It's what every company now needs to do. Okay. So next week, we're going to talk about generations. Now, the session was originally designed by Verpe, who did the original design, as millennial global leaders. But I'm an X generation and you guys are all Z generation. So I don't see why we should be talking about the millennials alone. I want to talk about generational changes. So next week, we're going to be talking about the impact of generations in how people lead. And there's 3 questions I want you to think about between now and then. How do you think you, as a Z generation leader, are likely to be different to the traditional other generation leaders? That's the first question. Second question is, what are the tensions that arise in the different leadership outlook between generations? And that works both ways. It could be you managing older, different generations, and that happens in technology a lot. You know, the directors, managers are all younger than the workers. Or all the people managing younger people with a different perspective. What are the tensions that happens when different generations have to lead each other? Those 2 things. I want you to think about those things. Okay. Thank you very much for your attention. Any questions before we finish? No? Everybody okay? Let me know you're there. Is anyone, can you hear me? I'm just worried that maybe.
Yeah, we're okay with the content.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much. Look, guys, if you're okay, we can finish 15 minutes early, 20 minutes early today. But if there's any questions, I'm here for you. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next week. All this materials on the line anyway. I've put it all onto Minerva. Sorry, go on. You were saying something.
I just say that nothing. Say see you, I said. See you next week.
See you next week. It's good to have you here. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope you got something out of it. Okay. Have a good day, guys. Take it easy. See you soon.